We are the Casual Gamers Project. This is our latest podcast episode. It's time to finally talk about Resident Evil. Hi, my name is Diggs and I'm joined by my fellow casual gamers Peter and Stevo.
Howdy.
Hello.
With the upcoming release of Resident Evil 4 Remake, we thought there's no time better than the present to dedicate an episode to our favourite game series of all time. So lads, Resident Evil, one of our favourite game franchises should I say of all time. It's just, I'm so excited to talk about this franchise.
Myself.
Oh,
and I'm just so happy that we're finally going to record an episode. So I think that there's probably the best thing to start with is, let's talk about our first experiences. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go first. So
yeah,
go from the beginning.
So, Resident Evil 1, straight to the point, Resident Evil 1 was the first one I played on PS1. And I just remember, Peter, you played it before me, a couple of weeks before me, and you would not shut up about this game.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where, I think even Steve, you were probably the same as well. I was like, yeah, he won't shut up about that bloody game.
I was
the way he
annoying
was
everybody.
explaining it was just like, no, this
I didn't
isn't real. We just couldn't believe it.
So a bit of context to that is that we were so used to playing Super Nintendo, Sega Mega Drive, 2D pixel games, whether it was side-scrolling, whether it was your top-down views like Zelda, stuff like that. You were just used to 2D. That was it.
That was it.
Peter, you came home from Veddy's house. Who, that's who introduced all of us basically. Resident Evil. But you came home from Veddy's house and you were like, I played this game called Resident Evil. It's unbelievable. Like, you start off in this mansion. It's got zombies and monsters, and you can run around the entire mansion. And you were saying, I was saying to you, so what, it's like Zelda type thing or whatever, and you were like, no, it's 3D, like you can go around all the rooms individually, you can go through doors and into the room. And I couldn't wrap my head around this. As I said, we were so used to 2D pixel graphics then, and you were explaining it to me, and hindsight now, you were explaining it perfectly to me, but my brain couldn't understand it, and I was like, no. I was sure, Peter, that I was misunderstanding what you were saying, and I was going to be disappointed. But boy, was I not disappointed. I'll never forget when I first saw it, and Veddy brought his console down to your house, brought the game with him, and I finally got to see it. And I'll never forget, I think at that point, I can't remember if whoever was playing it was playing obviously a saved game, and I think they were in the guardhouse. So it's that room where you go in, it's like a recreational room with the pool tables.
Yeah.
Giant spiders. My word.
On the ceiling and the drop down. Yeah.
Just to cut across you, Dig, for a second, I'll never forget one of the words that you actually said when I first got to see it. And I know, we don't usually swear on this, but it was it was you seen the zombie's head being blown off with a shotgun, and all I remember was you were like, holy your jaw just dropped.
Because I was big into the thing at that time. My favourite game was Mortal Kombat. I think it was Mortal Kombat 2 or something, or maybe 3, I can't remember. But violence and all that there, the fatalities, I love Mortal Kombat because of the fatalities. And then as you say, I saw the zombie getting his head blown off, and I was like, holy what the hell. I was like, wow. But I was so amazed that this game had been designed where with the pre-rendered backgrounds it looked amazing. For the time it came out, it looked phenomenal. But the fact that you could go from room to room, they had the dining room, so you had the dining room, you could run all the way around the table. That sounds ridiculous, but you weren't used to doing that in video games, physically being able to run around the objects. And I was like, wow. It was just incredible. I could not believe what I was seeing. And I think throw zombies into it, the horror elements, being able to multiple weapons, it was just unbelievable. And then quickly about the soundtrack, my word, the soundtrack was phenomenal in that game too. And I think the biggest attraction to me about Resident Evil was the puzzle. I loved the idea that it wasn't just mindless violence going around blowing up or killing enemies and shooting enemies and stuff like that. It worked out your brain too, you know, and I thought that was a perfect blend. And the fact that the mansion was so creepy, but like the mansion design was so cool. I just remember, I just wanted to be there. I was like, I would actually love to be able to go into the mansion.
The
just
music
looked amazing.
Yeah, the music and the atmosphere was beyond anything that I'd ever witnessed in a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know the game gets slated for its bad voice acting and all that kind of crap, but at the time I didn't care.
No,
the truth is, none of us cared about the acting. We were just privileged to play the game.
It was the game itself that just opened up a whole new world. It was just like, this isn't real, this isn't happening. We can actually, as you said, things can move around objects. They get basically a 3D model in a pre-rendered background.
Yeah.
It was... We've never witnessed anything like this before.
Yeah, and just like the enemies that was in it, you think of like you the first introduction to enemies was, well, I guess the dogs, wasn't it? The dogs were chasing you in the FMV, which was pretty cool. That live action kind of intro.
That's what actually got me. When I first started playing, like a proper movie sequence.
Yeah,
to start the game off.
Yeah,
you
that
never had that.
The game.
No, I was like, oh, what's going on?
That was the perfect example of just like what the PlayStation could do with the fact that it was CD-ROM based.
Yeah. Oh, it just blew my mind.
Really the element of surprise with the PlayStation was beyond anything that we could even comprehend at that time. Like, you know, like it just. Like the thing is, like, if for us personally, like for us as gamers, even because we were like say in our early teens around the time, for us it was the perfect game to arrive at the perfect time, basically in terms of games in general, because we'd never heard of the PlayStation. Well, we kind of heard of it, but we didn't really know what it was really about, and then to go and play it and to play the games that we did play, but then for Resident Evil to literally have that impact and to ingrain itself in the way that it has is just in itself is just truly phenomenal. It really is.
You took exactly what I was going to say out of my own mouth. We played games previous to Resident Evil, not too many, because Resident Evil was one of the earlier games for PlayStation as well, as far as I can remember. Like,
96.
You'd wipe out and you'd Time Commander and Air Combat, you had a few others. But this one was, what would you say, it just, as the Resident Evil game just brought it to all the other games to a whole new level. It's like the games previous to that, boys, these have some work to do to build up to this. It was just absolutely phenomenal.
For me, it was the standard game, and it pretty much set the standard
for
everything.
Once previous, so
everything
was a lot to do.
Yeah.
It was top notch. You know, hindsight now, the only thing that I think let it down was basically just the bad dialogue and bad voice acting. That's it. But other than that, I would consider it one of the best.
I passed no remarks on it. Like later on, when you get used to it, you could say, "Oh yeah, it was." But at the time, you didn't even care. You was just glued to it.
I was just
real.
It was so kind of blown away by how good it was. That didn't even faze me, you know, like. And it's just like, as I said, the soundtrack was incredible. Like, you go into different areas and the soundtrack would change. And you know, when you think of the save room, and like generally the save room was just a safe zone, basically.
Yeah.
You're being outrun by zombies or whatever, and the blood would be pumping, and then you get into the save room and the music was just so calm, and you were just like, this is perfect. This is just time to de-stress now before I go back out there.
Yeah.
But I just, it's like, that's my first experience. I guess you guys are more or less the same, because we all played it more or less the same time.
Yeah.
So I'd say there's really a few weeks in the difference between each of us playing it, you know.
I'll never forget, like, the first time playing it. Like, I was handed the controller, and it just so happened to be in the guardhouse. And I walked into that recreation room where the pool table and all that is, and I didn't even see the spider on the ceiling above me. And it landed in front of me, and I swear to God, I actually, like, threw the controller out of sheer terror. I just couldn't believe it. And all I could do was just grab the controller again and just run out of the room. Not even try and shoot it, just run out of the room.
Thank God it didn't go through the
TV. Yeah, but it's probably the first video game, really, isn't it? Like that I can think of, certainly, that really added horror. I'm trying to think of other games that added horror. I don't think there was, really, when you think about it. Maybe some obscure stuff.
They tried to do stuff like during the 8-bit and 16-bit era, but they there was certain elements. What made those games probably creepy in some regards would have been the music. It definitely set the tone, but nothing had really matched that height of what, say, Resident Evil was able to do, because again with the 3D graphics, but it had everything. Like, it had the movie sequences, it had the one of the best soundtracks in my opinion ever in a game. It's still, even to this day, it's amazing.
Absolutely,
but it's just it captured everything that was good about it. I know, like you were saying, like people give out and they laugh at the voice acting, but it is a masterpiece. But at the same time, it's not perfect. So there's always going to be there's always going to be pros and cons to it. But whatever it is about the voice acting, you can put that aside. And like for us, you know yourself, like we mentioned, the voice acting never fazed us at all, because we were just so privileged to play such an awesome game. And the impact that it has on us, like a game is over 25, it's nearly 27 years old now, and we're still talking about it as fondly today as and literally every time we mention video games, Resident Evil comes up in the conversation all the time. I mean, like all the time, and there's a reason for that. It's because it's the game that really set the benchmark for all of us. It set the standard, and it just literally everything that we played after that, there was no comparison, and there is no comparison really.
Yeah, I think I literally played that game for like 2 years straight.
Yeah, we all
probably completed it 100 times, never bored of it.
Yeah, and I still
do you remember like when it was before we had a PS1 and we used to rent out the console.
Yeah,
we'd rent out the game and we'd play through it, no memory card.
Yeah.
And it was just like, if you die, it's permadeath. Start again.
But that's how we got so good at the game. It was just trial and error and just persistence. We were adamant we wanted to finish it.
Weeks later, then we ended up just trying the speed run to get the rocket launcher, wasn't it? Under 3 hours.
And we did manage to do it as well. Once we figured out that we could do it.
That was like 2 a.m, I think, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh, even later, 3, 4 a.m. Like sometimes it just go on and on. Like I remember, like
I know, and you had no memory card to save it so that you could play with the rocket launcher the next day.
For me, like if I look back, and I know you all agree with this, like with regards to like our best memories, for me that's one of the best times. Like I was 14 at the time, going on 15, and now show me age now when I think about it. But at the same time, for me that was one of the best times with regards to video games, because like say you'd rent the PlayStation out at the weekends and you always got a choice of 2 games. Now we didn't have a memory card, but we always made sure that one of those games for the first like 6 months in a year until we got our own PlayStations, Resident Evil was one of the games that we got literally every weekend. Every single weekend.
Got to play.
Yeah. And the other game that we would get was always kind of like a bonus game. Yeah, kind of. It's something that we just kind of just pick up and just enjoy for what it is. But Resident Evil had to be there. And it wasn't just like, say, with me, it was with you, it was with Steve-O. Even our younger brothers were the same, because they didn't really play it that much, but they loved watching people playing it. Yeah. Exactly. And we were all kind of helping each other out and just sitting there and just chilling it with your mates, playing pretty much everybody's favourite game. And you know what? That's for me, that's the, how would you call it, epitome. That's the idea behind games, something that sparks so much interest that everybody can really get behind, and everybody that's in the room, everybody around you enjoys it for what it is. And like for me, that was, out of all the games I've ever played, that for me was definitely hands down one of the best, if not the best, of all of the memories that I've had over the years.
I think for me anyway, there's a certain amount of games that I've played over the last 30 years. That there's only so many that you become obsessed with. And Resident Evil is definitely
it is an obsession.
I used to be before I was obsessed with Mortal Kombat. That was my go-to game. And then as soon as I saw Resident Evil, I was like, Mortal what? It's Resident Evil. Like when you're obsessed with video games, and even your parents know what the game is, and they've never played a game in their life.
when you think about it, like with the earlier Mortal Kombat games, you kind of got some inkling of the story, but it was really told through like still images and dialogue and text. Whereas Resident Evil told the basis of the story, even though like regardless of the voice acting, but it still told the story in real time as you progress through the game at different intervals. And even one of the things that I even want to touch on as well, which I know we will go into more detail, was kind of like the live choice kind of sequence as well, that depended on different things you would pick up and different things that you would use in the game could have a different outcome, and it would change certain elements of the dialogue later into the game. And that's what kept you coming back for more. You wanted to find out everything in the game.
And the possible endings.
Yeah.
Affected the possible ending,
there was so many possibilities with Resident Evil. That's what the crazy thing was about it. It wasn't only just, say, getting used to the whole dynamic of the game. It's the fact that there was so many hidden secrets, and there was loads of like what if moments and like aha moments and stuff. You know, it's just it really did have it all in abundance. Like
it did, yeah. It didn't explicitly tell you how to play the game. Like I always remember in school, people would be like, they either loved it or they hate it. They were like, I'm stuck. Like, what the hell do I do with the ammo discs? And I'm just like, well, there's another thing you need to do with them. You know, where's the latest Doom? Was it the Doom medals they were called?
Doom books.
Yeah.
Doom books. They had the medals in them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like people were like, that's what I loved about Resident Evil. It really challenged you. Do you remember, like even in the guardhouse, was it the chemical room or the medicine room?
Yeah.
It had a keypad, and we were like, you probably can't get in there. And I was like, no, I'm getting in there. And do you remember I unlocked it one night? Like, holy crap! And then what it did was it allowed you to create the chemical mix to affect the Plant 42, which then I think prevented Barry from coming in.
It also had an effect on the story playing out as well.
Yeah, it was cool, wasn't it? I loved all that.
Yeah.
Here's a question I'm going to point it at you, Steve-O. When you think of Resident Evil, right, so say the first game, anyway, do you consider that to be a puzzle game?
I do.
The base structure of it, the foundation of it, a puzzle game?
I actually do. Because you look back at it now, or say with games nowadays, you kind of know what you kind of have to do. You're basically checking everything. Back then, you really didn't. I'll just give you, for talk's sake, you're doing books, as you said. You get a book, you say, I have to put this somewhere. And you can carry it around for ages and ages and ages. And little did you know, all you had to do was examine it and open it up, and there was a medal inside it.
Exactly, yeah. People didn't know about that.
Well, people hadn't a clue.
It was before the internet.
Yeah. A lot of the elements.
That's just one of the things, you know what I mean? It was so...
Yeah.
What would I say? It was brilliantly done, but people wouldn't realise it. You think you'd just say, a book, I'm going to have to slot into a bookshelf or to open up something and like a passageway or something like that. No, never think of examining.
It's like you said, Dig. A lot of the elements in the game weren't obvious at first glance. You really had to dive deeper to figure out what was going on.
Do you know, a guy in my class in school, I gave him at the end of it, and I was like, you're going to love this game. It's unbelievable. Right? Yeah. And he played it for 20 minutes and he says, this game's crap. Why do you like this game so much? What? And I says, are you serious? And I says, well, what did you do in it? And he says, oh, well, I went into the dining room and stuff like that, and then I went across the hall and I got into the next room and dogs burst through the window. I says, yeah, did you kill them, like shoot them? He goes, no, I sprayed that acid on them. And I was like, what acid?
Acid.
And he says, the can of acid that you get. Are you... It's like the F8 spray.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, all right. Yeah.
I just think this
game's not for you.
Yeah, I just think some people just really
weren't clued in. That's the first thing that popped into my head. He put the F8 spray in and we thought that was going to kill him.
Yeah, he thought that was like mace or something.
I actually, you know what, Dig? I remember you telling
me. Can run away.
I actually remember that story, and I remember you telling me that, and we were all in stitches laughing. Yeah.
No, to be fair, right? Only for I had the likes of Veddy and you showed me how to play the game, I possibly could have done something like that.
Something like that as well, yeah.
But no, but that's what I love. And Steve, we hit the nail on the head there with the Doom books. That's exactly what I mean. The game, like even the part where you and Mark, you accidentally stumbled across the part where Barry, you know, when you fight the snake the second time,
then you kill him for good, yeah.
You drop down, he drops the rope. But if you actually just wait a few seconds, he comes back with a new rope and he gives you key code, isn't it?
Yeah. But you know the funny part about that part is, he actually tells you to wait there. But the thing is, there's a gravestone at the back.
Yeah.
And you can click on it to go down.
The explorer in you.
Yeah, the explorer in you going, oh, well, I'm not fucking waiting. You don't wait, you just go straight down. And what actually happened with us was when I was in Freddy's house, I think we got distracted. I don't know, maybe his mum was calling him or something, and then all of a sudden the cutscene came in. Oh, look. And then all of a sudden he dropped down the rope, came up, and everything changed. I was like,
I'll never forget that, because that was hilarious. Because I remember then a few minutes after that happened, you and Veddy rang the house phone, and Dig, you were over in the house at the time, and the two of you screaming, you only have to find out this, only blah blah blah. I'm like, hold on, calm down. And then sure, we were as bad. We couldn't wait to hear it as well. And eventually, when you could calm yourselves down to tell us. We're like, you know, I remember I think I had to tell Veddy, I think, slow down, speak slower.
That's what I actually loved about it, because like, it gives you two ways. Like, it's telling you to do something, but then you have another option, and if you go over to it, you can click on going, oh, what do I do? Do I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go?
Why?
You went, and everybody, I'd say 10 out of 10 people went and hit the wee gravestone or the tombstone that was there. Click that button, right? And then straight down to underneath where you come up the stairs back into the mansion.
See, the mad thing about like Resident Evil, why is it so kind of like addictive and why it holds so many memories is because we were all addicted to it, we were all excited by it. Like even say our mate Veddy that got us introduced to it, and at the time we were all addicted to the game. Like there wasn't a single one of us that wasn't, you know, mad into the game. We were all equally as addicted. It's like we were literally eating, sleeping and drinking Resident Evil, you could say, in that sense, like, because every conversation we had about video games, literally Resident Evil was the topic of conversation for such a long time. And then we would, like, for me, it was nothing better than waiting, like, say you get your pocket money at the end of every week, and couldn't wait then for me folks to go out so that we could rent out the PlayStation just to get to play Resident Evil every Friday. See, Friday was the best day of the week. It's always in our house. You know, could not wait for Friday. They didn't care about what was going on the rest of the week, like getting the PlayStation on Friday, getting the Resident Evil.
We get to Friday.
Yeah.
That was it,
yeah.
So, moving along about Resident Evil 1, so in terms of the enemies, we know zombies plentiful in it, but I wanted to mention quickly about the hunters, because hunters scared the bejesus out of me.
Click.
But it's not that, it's the fear of them one hit kill, you know.
And
especially when you didn't have a memory card at the time. It was just so much anxiety every time you go, especially in the underground. But you know, when you come back into the mansion after being in the underground, and suddenly that's another part that we loved. The fact that you went back over old ground, but things changed. I love that.
Yeah, that's to say that the first thing I ever seen
with the hunter running. Do you remember?
Yeah,
intro, that was pretty cool.
I think I like it more. The fact is, you kind of knew the intro when you first came back into the mansion the second time and you fought the hunters, and it was more or less like if they swipe at you, yes, they'll hurt you, they'll damage you. You can heal yourself, but if they kind of jumped and say swiped, that was it. You were gone. That was your head off your shoulders.
See, the one thing I loved about the game as well...
It was a one-hit kill. That was it. You were gone.
See, that was one of the many elements I loved about the game as well, is the fact is you overcome one adversary or hurdle that was really kind of thought-provoking. You were trying to solve puzzles in the meantime, trying to conserve ammo. But then you were met with an even bigger foe. And like, let's say, going back into the mansion, you only have to get in the key to think to yourself, right, oh, now I can get into those doors, hopefully, that I couldn't get into before, that I've been desperately trying to get in to see what's in them. And because that was the best thing about it, is the exploration, like, say, with the rooms, trying to figure out what was in all of those rooms and how it was going to do this or that. But then you
wonder what's behind that door.
But then you didn't expect then, not only did you have to, that you had taught yourself, right, you have this key or whatever it was to get into the room, but you didn't know that things were going to change so drastically. And the fact is, when you were just entering the mansion, I'll never forget that intro, because I did not expect what was coming. I remember literally nearly crapping myself when I seen the hunter. I was like, what the F is that? And I was just like, Jesus. And I remember...
Yeah, it was like a frog with claws or something.
And I do remember, because we were playing on the original version of Resident Evil that Veddy had, for some reason, when you were shooting, like, say, with weapons, sometimes it would take a wee bit longer to kill them. With certain weapons, you'd have to shoot an extra shot or two, and there was no chance of trying to kill those things with a handgun unless you're really confident with it.
Yeah.
So you
see those boys going around with the knife only thing. That's insane.
And
what it reminded me of was, like, just say like your big toe when you're walking, you hear a click.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the hunters went, click, click, click.
But
and you didn't know where to wail.
But that's a genius part of the soundtrack, is that you come out of a door, you had like static camera angles, and you couldn't see what was around a certain corner, but you'd either hear the click, or you'd hear the shuffle or the sniff of the zombie. You're just like, I'm not going to now.
I think I used to scare the crap out of you too, because I dislocated my toe when I was a kid playing football out in the street. I actually broke my toe and I didn't realise it, and now it clicks all the time. And I remember I used to walk around the house and I'd hear this click coming up the landing, and then usually playing the game like, not a hunter, like, no, it's just Peter coming in.
He's hunting for a game of Resident Evil.
But the boss fights were really cool. Like I just couldn't believe that there was like that huge snake. I was almost like, how am I going to kill this thing? But
can I say something?
Yeah.
Just say the snake. You could say it'll be your first main boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
But another part of Resident Evil, which I loved, I don't know about Jews, but you can give your opinion in a second. And something we never witnessed. It was like your inventory management.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was more or less like you can only it was 6 items you can carry.
6 with Chris and 8 with Jill.
Well, 6 and 8. Depending on the character, but you can only hold so many. But when you were fighting, say you got to the first boss, it was like you were constantly running back and forth. Have I enough shotgun shells? Have I enough handgun shells? Have I enough health? Yeah. If not, you go back to make sure you were properly prepared for that fight. I actually loved that about the game. You just weren't jumping straight in and going, oh no. You were making sure you were prepared. You know what I mean?
But the thing is, when you first played the game, like I mentioned earlier, it didn't hold your hand. So you could have walked into that room. The music
you could have walked in,
and you're like, I've 10 bullets in my Beretta, and I haven't a chance. Run back out, and that was really cool. And like the fact that, as I said, like it didn't hold your hand, so you could progress in that game and get stuck because you don't have enough ammo to do it, unless you're skilled with the knife.
Funny enough, just when we're discussing that, like, even just going slightly just off top a wee bit, that game I was telling you about, Dig, before we jumped on this chat, that new one that's on Steam, I was playing it there the other day, and again, it's modelled off of Resident Evil. It uses all the fixed cameras. Now it has updated graphics, but that was one thing I found when I was playing the game. I found myself having to do a lot of what you guys were just saying there with the exploration, but I found myself having to constantly backtrack because of having to manage my inventory, trying to be very strategic with what I had between the weapons, the key cards, or whether I had certain health or not, or no health or no ammo. And I found myself constantly having to run back and forth to the item box so that I could get keys out so I could save the game, or I could, do this and that. And straight away, the whole time I was playing, I was like, Jesus, this brings it all back. Because that's exactly the way Resident Evil is.
Exact same as Resident Evil,
yeah.
It's the exact same.
And for me, that, like, I agree with you, that's definitely for me one of the key factors of it. That you have that cautious approach, but at the same time you're trying to be strategic. So you have to.
It forces you to be conservative.
Yeah. That's what I love about it.
It's not a run game.
No.
Have enough health, have enough bullets, have I got the strongest gun possible.
Yeah.
And that's what it was all about. It was beautifully done.
Only in time when you get more comfortable with it, then you can kind of maybe chance your arm a little bit more, but you genuinely will never do that when you're first playing it. So you won't.
Even the save, for talk's sake. You had typewriters on old place when we first started with typewriter. Oh, what the hell is this? If you had an ink ribbon, you could save it again. Going, I don't have an ink ribbon, I want to save it now.
Yeah.
Then when we first started, and then all of a sudden you get an ink ribbon, you save it, and you go, oh, that's grand. But you only get 2 ink ribbons, and you go, oh no, I'm using one.
I do remember when we first got our PlayStation, Christmas '97, and when we first got the memory cards, and we were like, yes. All we wanted the memory card for was to save our files in Resident Evil over every other game that we had.
Exactly, yeah. But like all them elements was brilliant. Like your saving, your item management. Like she said, puzzle solving, everything that you just mentioned, everything about it was just, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
It really
absolutely
was.
Yeah, it was the perfect game at the perfect time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So, in terms of playing the game, who's your go-to character?
I always pick Jill. I do like Chris, but I think Jill just was good balance.
Jill with the extra 2 inventory slots.
Jill was the first character I picked when I played it.
Yeah.
I'll stick with her.
Which is kind of weird when you think about it, because in most action style games, you always go for the man as the protagonist. It's always kind of more macho thing. But with Resident Evil, I don't know.
It was new, you see.
Yeah, it was new. You were drawn, and the fact is, you weren't used to seeing really many female protagonists that were so like badass in the game, and Jill was just cool.
But don't I love about it as well? Like you had the male and female, right? Mm-hmm. Jill had her attributes. Chris had his. Jill could get a shotgun or do different things. She'd 8 inventory slots. Well, Chris was stronger. He was,
and she could pick locks as well.
And she could pick locks. Chris couldn't. He was stronger, but he only had 6 inventory. It was so good that
I think
were different.
Chris was a slightly more challenging story.
Yeah, right? It was harder. Yeah,
I think that was the point of it, really. I know you had like your secondary, your supporting character with Jill was Barry, and with Chris it was Rebecca. Yeah.
To look after that. Even if you look at that, like you look at other games, and you could have 2 characters you can play, or you can choose from to play as, but most of them could be being up the same. But at that time, the 2 of them was completely different in terms of what they had and what they could do. And it was just, I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Like I said, with Chris and Rebecca and Jill and Barry and what they could do, I thought it was just phenomenal. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I would always pick Jill, actually, when I'm playing the game.
It was easy because she could pick locks, but Chris used to go around and find, what would you say, the keys. What would they call it? Small keys, was it, or something?
Yeah, you had the wee small individual
small keys to open up the drawers and everything.
Yeah.
That was a nuisance. But it was fun at the time because you made sure, right, I didn't open this drawer, I don't know what's in here, and then all of a sudden you open it and you go, I told you.
It actually added a lot more depth to the gameplay that when you got round to playing Chris is one that you really had to think outside the box. You're like, right, this is going to take a wee bit longer, but I have to really think and strategize where I'm going to use all of these items and what.
In terms of the weapons, right? So Jill, she had her normal Beretta. She got the shotgun. She got the bazooka.
Yeah.
The Magnum.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Chris didn't get the bazooka, but he briefly got a flamethrower in the underground for a small period.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Yeah, but you couldn't take a witch outside of it because you needed to use it to unlock the back.
You had to go. You had to hang it back up. I remember that.
Yeah.
All right. So that's characters and campaigns.
Even another one says, just say talking about health. Like say you the first aid spray, but over the course of the game you pick up a green herb. You pick up a red one, and you pick up blue. And anybody never played, you pick up red and go, I can't use this to help me or to heal myself. I'm going, no, because you have to combine it. You can use the green one, combine the green and red, full health, blue, poison. See, even the likes of that, simple things now when we look back at it. But back then you're going, oh no, you were gathering everything because you just never knew what the hell was coming in front of you.
But that goes back to what we were discussing earlier as well with regards to the, not everything being obvious. The only way, like say, as us as beginners coming into it, you had to read that book. But sure, even at that, when we read that book in that room, the botany book or whatever you call it, and even at that, it still didn't make a lot of sense. I remember the first time reading it, it really didn't make sense because you didn't even know how to combine items in the first place. I remember I had to get Veddy to show me how to do it, and mind you, he wasn't too great at it either. He was still getting familiar with the game too. So we
won the game. After you were all battered around.
It was kind of like the blind leading the blind, but sure, we got there in the end. Yeah, but that's the thing. Even with that, it still wasn't obvious to do these things unless you managed to have your wits about you and you're aware of different things, like say reading the books and understanding the information and the ins and outs of what was going on in the game, because a lot of it was definitely trial and error in all respects.
Most definitely.
Yeah. So the inventory screen, like one of the features, remember you had it would display your health, so you'd be fine or cautious or danger. That was another pretty cool way to.
Yeah, it was to choose whatever gun to equip and everything. That was.
The inventory was really good. Now, if I remember correctly, you had to go into there to reload your gun, right?
Some cases you did. Yeah.
The one thing I loved, reload the gun is if you wasted the clip as far as you know.
You had to you had to go into the inventory with the bazooka because it wouldn't manually reload on its own for whatever reason. And then
I think that was because there was different types of
ammo. Yeah. The one thing I loved about the inventory was the fact is that you could go into the check option and you could visually see in real time 3D. You could do a full 3D circle around
the item,
the weapons or the items you were using. And I used to do that looking at the guns, and the level of detail was unbelievable for its time. I'd never seen anything like it at the time. It was incredible.
That was one of the big things about Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 got rid of that.
Yeah.
Checking. 3D.
Yeah.
The items didn't go into 3D when you checked them.
Because I remember myself and Veddy would sit for ages just looking at all of the details of the Beretta, the shotgun, looking at everything at it. Because we were so just bemused by how real it looked at the time.
Yeah, no, it was class. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to just quickly go back to the enemies. Like when you think of. So you had the snake, that was your first boss fight. You had those giant spiders, like Jesus Christ, they scared the shit out of me.
Oh.
Yeah, in the guardhouse. Plant 42, that was a bit mad. It was a bit of a spoof enemy, wasn't it? Really, when you think, the plants are here to eat us. But
I was kind of expecting a bit more. Like in the guardhouse, with a plant, a massive mutated plant, I was kind of expecting a bit more.
Yeah, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. But after that, where did you end up then? You ended up in the
after the guardhouse. You went back into the mansion. Second time.
Yeah,
round. But that was Snake, right? That was your boss.
You're basically aiming to fight him again, yeah. But literally,
you went to the underground.
Yeah.
So who was the giant spider was the boss in the underground?
I'll never forget the first time when I actually got the snake the first time, because I knew when you met your man Richard out in the hall, you're like a big snake. You didn't think it was going to be that big, and you're left going into the room.
I know, that's what I mean.
You're like,
you walked in. I was like, and the music was good too, you know, it was good pumping music.
I remember literally just going into that room, and I think it was then we made Eddie's house at the time, and we were trying to do it. And it was the first time I'd ever gotten into the room, and I literally froze. I didn't know what to do. I scared the crap out of me.
I would just turn and run.
The worst about it was, you're into the room, and then all of a sudden he comes out and he runs around. You're trying to run around the pillar in the box, and as soon as he bites you once, you check your entry poison. You go, no! Oh no, I'm going to die.
The amount of times I died in that, because you'd be trying to use different weapon types, and the amount of times we ran out of ammo. I remember trying to use a shotgun one time, and I had a crap ton of bullets and used them all, still didn't kill him. I don't know whether the game glitched or what was going on, but we were there and it was like forever. Even sometimes with the grenade launcher, it took you forever to put that thing down or for the game to go away.
I think one of the best ways to kill that thing was to kind of run around it and get to the back of it and gun down at it.
That was the best way to do it.
Because I do remember loads of times dying after wasting a ton of ammo on it, thinking I put it down, and then it still wouldn't go down, you know?
So the snake was tough.
Yeah.
But I remember that underground, and you just had to fight the giant spider, and I was just... That was another occasion. It was just open the door, you didn't kick in.
You didn't expect that at all.
You'd see this thing, and it was at least what? It must have been at least 2 to 3 times bigger than the normal spider.
Oh yeah.
And for me, that was just like, nope, back out the door.
And see,
what am I supposed to do?
It actually took us a couple of months to figure out the best type of weapons to use on that thing as well, to kill it the most efficiently and quickest too. Because we kept going in trying to use the shotgun or the grenade launcher, and it just took forever. And the amount of times, remember when we used to play it without the memory card, and we'd always get to that point, and that was the point where we would always die.
Yes. Yeah. It's not, you know what, it's not even that boss fight. If you remember correctly, the boulder thing.
Leading up to it,
that done me.
Because you were only after, because you were already, the adrenaline was already pumping from getting over those hurdles, and then literally the next room you go into, and then there's a big fucking spider.
Before that, when you do the boulder thing and you escape the boulder, and then you go around the corner, what's around there?
Hunter,
head swipe, wham.
I don't know. I remember playing as Chris loads of times, and dead, literally one swipe gone. You didn't even have time to react a lot of the time.
Yeah, if they landed you, they swipe, you're as good as dead. That's it.
It was only until later on I kind of figured out that if you had full health, they never done that swipe. But if you were kind of like, it wasn't that you were on borderline caution. If you were like on like where you were fine, but it was like yellow fine, you were still on caution, and that's where fine gone.
Yeah,
I think we kind of, as time went on, we
figured that out in time.
See, when the bowler went and say the hunter was there at the door, but you couldn't see him because he was behind the corner, we started walking backwards just to get his attention. We'd run and just get him into the open and then just unloaded him, going, right, nice one, we got you. And then you go into the spider.
Well, you know the saying, once bitten, twice shy, and that meant in that case we were killed so many times in that point with that hunter.
There was a lot of lessons learned in that game.
There was, oh my god.
But we had every part.
We had to literally figure out a strategy for each part of the game that we went through, just to get through it in the easiest possible way.
Yeah, but it was good fun doing it.
That was the beauty of it. That's what kept us playing the game.
Because we learned so much about the game, and so many things that we tried. Like for us, it was an experiment as much as it was enjoyment, really, in a lot of ways. Because there was just so many cool things that we tried in it. Like
I loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's why it's my favourite game.
So going on to the next bosses that we fought. So you had the shark, right? I remember like you saying to me, right, this room you're going into is flooded and there's a shark in it, and you got to run and get it. And I just remember you could run and you'd be running kind of slowly and you get close to where your destination was, and that FMV sequence would start, and it's just basically like first person view of a shark chasing you, and I was just like, oh no, no, and then it was just get into the room as quickly as possible to drain the water.
And then you realise the door, you're standing outside, you think you're going to go into that room, and you realise it's locked, you can't open, it's the door next to you. Like,
exactly. It was always the one in front of you, and you're like, no!
I did that,
panic stations.
I got killed.
A couple of times, I remember
up the wee platform, and it jumped up and he bit me, and that was me dead.
I remember a couple of times actually forgetting to take the key with me. I don't know why. I put it in a storage box or completely forgot to take it with me. And of course I went down there and the rest
That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty, because you didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But you knew down for next time, you said, right, I load something, I knew now to take this key, I'm going to go back there and I should be able to do it.
Let's just say that game was the perfect example of learning from your mistakes.
Yeah.
You think about different keys you had and different things you had, you didn't know what they were for at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't until you progressed, and like you said there with the shark, you had the key for the shark, you didn't know it was for that room.
No.
You know, that was the beauty of it. That's what made you play it. You said, once you died, oh, I'm playing it again. Well, many other people say, that's it, I'm throwing it in, I'm not playing no more.
Yeah.
But I remember I was kind of disappointed then, after you drained the tank, the boss fight was over really.
It was, you didn't actually have to fight the shark at all. I was disappointed.
It was just flapping around there, and then that was it. But anyway, so
I was doing 360s around it. And going,
yeah. I think the next boss after that was basically in the lab, wasn't it? Against the tyrant.
Well, after the shark, then the spider, and then the tyrant, and after that.
But even just before we get to the tyrant,
the shark was before the spider, was it?
Yeah, the shark was before the spider.
The shark was before the spider. After the spider, then the tyrant. But
the shark was actually in the guardhouse, in the basement of the guardhouse.
That's it. Yeah, I was trying to think. I thought for some reason it was after all of that.
But even now, just saying with that, like the basement of the guardhouse and other things, the fact is you can actually go behind certain objects and you could actually move them out of your way. You had ladders, or you had, cabinets. You could move them out of the way to get certain things. Boxes, or you could move different things out of your way to go down or to progress through the game. Like stay with the shark for talks like the guardhouse. You had to move different bookshelves from side to side, and all of a sudden it revealed a ladder. If you didn't move them, you wouldn't have had a clue. I'm running around this game and I still don't know what to do. And you're probably there with the key in your inventory, you don't know how to use it because you just didn't move objects out of your way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I loved about it. It just didn't hold your hand. You kept learning as you went along.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the tyrant, the spider, and then the tyrant. Yeah, the tyrant,
just before we get to the tyrant, talking about enemies again in the laboratory, when you have to go down to.
I know what you want to say.
These
Chimera
enemies, and I don't know what they're like. They're like insects.
Yeah, you go into the boiler room. Oh my god,
Chimera,
pain.
Yeah.
Scary as hell.
They were like an evolved, not an evolved hunter, but they were sort of like. They could climb the frames.
They could climb. Oh, I hated that. I could get right through the game and see that time. That would be the part.
Die in that. Yeah.
Oh, I hated that. That's where you had to go sit there and go and get your ammo discs. You wanted to do the full clear.
Because they would take ridiculous amount of health, even more so than the hunters. Because they had massive claws. They took ridiculous amount of health.
I remember vaguely. I think I just spent my time trying to run past them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all I tried to do as well.
Well, because what we used to always do is there'd always be a save room before the boiler room, so you'd actually always go in and make sure you saved it, and you'd always try to kind of plan a strategy on how you were going to approach that part.
Well, that's exactly what it was. It's just run in, out, get it done.
And then usually what happened is you have to go back into the first room and you have to run down to the other end of the room to flick a switch to turn on the power for the elevator, and only then you'd walk out and you'd forget to turn the switch on. You're like, I don't believe I have to go back in there again.
That's happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's happened. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that.
In terms of the last boss, the tyrant, what's your thoughts before we move on to
scary ass mofo?
That intro. I just God damn! It was just. What it was like to me, it was just like a revamped version of a Terminator, you know what I mean? Fella's not supposed to be killed.
The first time I ever got to that was when the last time Eddie was on. He'd actually had a save file on it. I'm sure he went in and literally all he had was 2 bullets in his Beretta. That's all he had. He wasted everything. He had nothing.
Rambo.
Yeah. I was like, dude, how are we going to do this? He's like, I don't know.
But what I loved about that game, you've always got to certain situations like that, and whether it be the tyrant or the spider or the snake, and you went in and played and going, oh, I don't have enough ammo to kill him.
Yeah, you'd have to go again.
Yeah, you'd have to go again. That happened numerous times.
I used to have this strategy where I'd make multiple save points, like, you know, I'd have maybe 3 or 4 going on the one run through, just in case I have to revert back to one of those.
I started that later on, but at the time, no, you were walking in and you said, oh no, all I've got is a knife. I'm going, hey, I'm going to get too far with this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the tyrant anyway, so I remember like that whole thing with Wesker, the revelation that Wesker's bad, and he'd, you know, basically blackmailed Barry and, you know, threatened to hurt his family. It was all pretty cool, kind of like...
There's a brilliant story to it.
I have to admit, I think I loved the lore and the whole story behind Resident Evil.
The whole story was brilliant.
I thought
it really was.
The creepy mansion out in the forest,
you
know, hidden away, and all the sinister stuff going on in the mansion, and the revelations of what's actually really going on there, and who Wesker really is, and all that kind of stuff. It was just amazing. But then you got to the tyrant, and how am I supposed to kill this thing? But, you know, hindsight now, you actually turn around and you say, well, he was actually a really easy boss, because all he did was just walk.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh, that was easy. And then you get to the very end of the game on the platform, and next minute he's running at you, and you're like...
Because I remember that was all depending if you managed to play it in a way where you got Barry to finish up with you in the laboratory.
That's what I love with multiple endings to the game. I thought
he was a git on the many times he died in that part as well.
I was the same. I couldn't wait for Brad to drop the rocket launcher down.
There was actually sometimes the games would glitch out in you too, where he wouldn't drop the rocket launcher and you could be there literally until the end, and sure the time would go off. I don't know what would happen. Sometimes it would happen.
I never forget that.
Yeah.
You know my aim and that I'd get the rocket launcher and miss.
But the time we used to... I remember when you got... It was actually Wesker that set triggers off the self-destruct, and that's when the timer starts. When you discovered that. So if you don't get to the helipad on time, you're at the risk of losing the opportunity of the rocket launcher being dropped to help you. I remember you used to got really nervous at times. There could be only like 10 seconds left, and you're like, come on, drop that rocket launcher.
It probably did happen to me. I'm trying to think. I remember shooting a rocket and I'd missed.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of times it happened to me. Like, if you're shooting the tyrant with the Colt Python and nothing, you'd be there on time and everything. It's still nothing. It just wouldn't.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually,
that happened quite a few times.
Yeah, that happened a few times. But you the fucking Colt, and probably the strongest gun in the game, and you shoot him 6 to 8 bullets, and no rocket launcher would drop. No.
Yeah.
So I think let's talk very quickly just about the Resident Evil 1 director's cut that was released then at a later stage, because I remember the big hype up to that really was the fact that it had a demo of Resident Evil 2.
I think that's what grasped everybody. Yeah.
And I'm guilty of. No, I wanted to play a director's cut so bad as well, but I think that was the gold dust. That was.
Yeah. It was the demo of Resident Evil 2, yeah.
I think that's what everybody wanted.
And do you remember the speed runs we used to do on that thing?
Yeah. Because I do remember, like, with that demo, the reason why that demo was so important, because you remember we were, like, looking at magazines and everything, but remember at the same time it was also going through a difficult phase where it was transitioning, because it was originally a different style type game where it looked completely different and stuff.
1.5.
Like what they call 1.5, yeah. And then when we got to the preview demo of Resident Evil 2, it looked totally different. And even at that, we were kind of like, now we were still awesome, but it was still different. I think for us, we didn't really mind so much because we were kind of like, we're just getting to play Resident Evil 2, we don't care. But we kind of forgot about the fact is that it was a completely different game, only literally a couple of months or a year before that, you know, in terms of its development, like, so it was crazy.
Yeah, I was watching some stuff about it there recently, and you know, when you do look at the footage of Resident Evil 1.5, one thing that critics kind of like complained about Resident Evil 1, other than the bad dialogue and the voice, was the colour tones in the game was quite dull.
Yeah,
and if you watch 1.5,
it has very similar style. It's very monotone.
Like the parts of the police station, you know, especially that car park, that underground car park.
There's like a lot of
tones. The walls look like the same from.
It was very dark.
It's very blue, like a very bluey
just
kind
dull,
of texture. Dull, yeah.
And then when we played the demo of Resident Evil 2, I mean Resident Evil 2 is so vibrant in colour in comparison.
I think that just while I'm thinking of it, I was reading of something as well. I think the reason why they kind of changed it as well, it wasn't just for the visuals in terms of bits and pieces, because there was some cool elements like in terms of damage as well, like because if your person got damaged, the blood would stay on their suit and stuff. But they done away with that in the final version. But I think it was due to the story as well, because I remember Ada was in the game, but she was a scientist. She wasn't actually a spy, and they kind of changed around because I think with the dialogue and the way things were going, it could have possibly ended the franchise there and then, without any possibility of future entries. So I think that's where they kind of felt like that the story didn't line up, or it didn't leave it open for more entries, you see. So that's why they kind of scrapped it. But still interesting.
But the thing, as people say, like the source file of Resident Evil 1.5 is out on the internet there, and some of the modders have done a really good job of putting it together.
I've played it myself a few times,
Even at that, they said the 1.5 version, to me, like the blue and everything, it actually looked like a proper police station. It actually did.
More so than the final version, it definitely was a proper police station.
It looked to me, this is just my opinion, it looked, 1.5, it looked like an actual police station compared to the original when it first came out, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, when the first one came out, brilliant, but the 1.5, it actually really looked as if it was a genuine police station.
It was kind of strange. In the release version, like the police station was an old museum, wasn't it? Converted to a police station.
Yeah.
I guess they needed something really big and whatnot, but anyway, But in terms of Resident Evil Director's Cut, like the Resident Evil 1, should I say, like the revised version of it, what did you think of that?
I enjoyed it because the fact is they changed up everything, all the items, all the enemies, they put them in different locations. So it wasn't a challenge, but it wasn't a challenge that, what would you say, it was too hard for us. Everything, we were so used to the game.
Everything was really good about it, bar the soundtrack.
Yes.
That was the issue to me, because it was completely done away with the original soundtrack.
Like, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, the friggin' laboratory.
But at least they added in the original game with it as well, and even a training mode that you could. Even the hidden cheat where you hold in, was it right on the D-pad for a couple of seconds, and it gave you like double ammo or something like that. So that was pretty cool.
You said about me fucking trying to do that, but I'm there on the screen pressing buttons. You still can't get it, Steve, can you? No. I go, no, and then all of a sudden, by chance, the screen, or the right and turn screen, I got it! How'd you get it? I don't know. I hadn't a clue. And so the simplest thing was I hold the right D-pad for a couple of seconds, was it? Was that it? And
that's all it was.
Then, no, I'm pushing buttons left, right, up, down, O1, O2, L1, L2.
That was also the one thing I loved about older games as well, like even going back to like even the Mega Drive Master System and stuff. The PlayStation was still doing that, where they allowed you to find hidden cheats where you have to enter in different combinations and stuff to unlock different features. They've pretty much done away with that now. They don't do that anymore in games. Now everything is hidden behind paywalls if you want all of those additional features, which I don't like.
Exactly.
So it's
sadly that's happened as well with Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Like you can unlock the stuff naturally, but it's very tempting to go and pay $1.99
because they don't give you any cheats. Yeah, they don't give you any cheats at all.
Especially at our age now, where you're working and you don't have all the hours of the day to
you want to spend time at it and you can't.
Unlock the stuff.
And to give you a price, and you go, it's very, very tempting. Just 2 seconds, you have it.
I'm guilty. I did that in Resident Evil 2. Okay, so let's move on to what many people consider to be the best Resident Evil game, should I say, and that's Resident Evil 2. So let's start at that demo that we got with Director's Cut. So it changed in the final version, but I just remember when we got that demo, I remember you got me. I was working at the time, Peter, and I said, I gave you the money. I says, will you go and get me Resident Evil Director's Cut in Uptown, one of the stores, and you did, and you left it. And I gave you strict instructions. I was like, leave it in my house for me when I get home, because I was like, ain't nobody playing that but me first. And I'll never forget, like I go home, I think I finished work at 6 o'clock that Saturday, and I think by 6:15 you were like, is a diggy, no.
I couldn't wait. I was as eager as you, like.
Yeah, but that it was me and you. I remember, like in my house, the two of us just sat there, and it was just like I played Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut first. I said no, I'm going to save the demo. Played Resident Evil Director's Cut, and I think I played so much, and I think I turned around and said to you, no, I can't resist. We have to get this.
Yeah.
We have to boot up this. And then the two of us was playing it, and I was just like, I think the thing that what blew me away was how vibrant the colours were and how good the quality and the graphical improvements and
visually that game was stunning.
Yeah, like but even the zombies, like like they were quite bland looking in Resident Evil 1, but then you saw like how good they looked in Resident Evil 2. And
but even the detail of the character model of Leon as well, even when you got close to the camera.
Yeah, like his uniform and everything was amazing.
One of the things that you even just wanted to touch on as well that we forgot to mention, even going back. Do you remember with the fixed cameras as well? Just when I think about it there, this other game I was playing recently does the same thing. When you aim the gun and you shoot at it, sometimes it would actually break the camera. You get bullet holes in the camera in the lens. I always thought that was pretty cool as well. Yeah. And I remember the demo actually did that as well. You remember with certain instances, if you shot at the camera, it would do the same. And I remember that actually happening a couple of times we played that demo too, which was pretty awesome.
Remind me, I know you remember, Peter. That's why I'm asking you. What was the starting point in the demo again?
You started right on the street. Pretty much the same way that you do with the full game.
Started on the street.
Was it the same spot?
Shop.
Yeah, it's pretty much in and around the same spot, but you didn't have as many.
Right.
Yeah,
I was thinking that did.
But you didn't have anywhere near the amount of zombies that you had in the final version of the game.
Because I remember the final version was slightly different, and you'd like, oh Jesus, how do I navigate all these zombies? Like that was one thing. Like if you didn't play Resident Evil 1 and you played Resident Evil 2, you were just like, whoa, wait a minute, like how am I supposed to get through it? You don't realise you just got to run for it.
Yeah.
People would think that you have to kill them, but no. Just run past them. Be strategic.
But yeah, the demo was cool. I think it became an obsession with us, wasn't it? Speed running.
Yeah.
Seeing if we can get into like another area that we didn't get into before.
Because there was a couple of rooms that you couldn't really unlock. I remember they said that there was rumours going around that you needed to have one of those Game Shock capture card things to have to get a code that you could use the keys, but I didn't really find out till later on. There was instances, like I remember, like when I was in college, I remember putting the CD into my PC. There is hidden files in it because I remember even being able to watch an intro from the game itself that was later on in the game. Do you remember one of the puzzles in the game where it was like it was getting one of those red jewels? You put something on it and it opened up one of those statues or something like that, and the jewel, when you put the two jewels into the statue, then it was something would open up and gave you something. It was like one of them crests, or it was like a plug, or remember like in the fighting game. But it had that intro in the demo, but you just couldn't access it.
Get to it,
Yeah, and there was a couple of doors that you needed those keys for, but apparently I only found out years later that those rooms hadn't been fully designed. Now, if you managed to glitch your way into them, or if you managed to use those codes, but they would be totally unfinished.
Yeah. But what was it? 10 minutes, wasn't it? Was the demo timer?
10-15 minutes. Well, actually, there was no timer on that particular demo, so there wasn't.
Wait, the director's cut demo?
Yeah, there was no timer on it at all. It was a future demo that came with one of the PlayStation magazines. It was a time demo because that was off of the actual final game.
Well, then I must have been confusing that. That's why I wasn't sure where we started.
No, the time frame for the preview was between 15 minutes. But I do remember the first time me and you played it, it took us over half an hour. Because we were just taking our time.
Yeah, because there was a certain point that you would trigger the end of the demo.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I remember just being so psyched for that game.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, let's move on to the main game. And what was everybody's first impressions?
Coming back off of Resident Evil, I'll be honest. Like after playing Resident Evil 1, which it is my favorite game of all time, hands down. I don't know how many times I can keep saying that all day. But if I was to look at Resident Evil 2 in terms of hype, for me, Resident Evil 2 for me was probably the most excited I've ever been for a game. Ever of any type of game. The reason being is because, again, I loved Resident Evil 1 so much that the thought of a second game that's anything like that, for me was just, I was just like, could not wait, because I love that is my favourite style of game. Pre-rendered backgrounds, fixed camera angles. I'm just in heaven with those style of games. Like even the non-horror games that we would have played growing up, and you look at the likes of Hard Aged, City Lost Children and others, it didn't matter whether it was horror or not, because we were obsessed with all those type of games back then. Once we got the idea with Resident Evil, anything that even reflected it in any shape or form, we were nearly all over, because we just enjoyed what those games represented. I know they weren't all as good as Resident Evil, but they still had a unique charm to them. And that's what I love about those games, is the charm. But even going back to what you were saying, like with like the hype, I was never so excited about a game. But when I got it, I will admit, I do love it, but I do think probably later games, or even I would still prefer Resident Evil 1, but then that's just my personal opinion. I know everybody else thinks Resident Evil 2. If you ask anybody, like a fan of Resident, because I think Resident Evil 2 is probably the biggest introduction to most of the franchise, because when everyone thinks of Resident Evil, they usually think of Resident Evil 2 as being the first game in the series, because not everybody would have played Resident Evil 1.
The first introduction Dave had.
Because not everybody would have played, and there's even a lot of people out there that have still never played the first game. And if I have watched videos of fellas that have, and they didn't like it, because they only preferred the second one.
Yeah.
So
it's like if you play the second game first and you see visually striking and all that there, and you go back to Resident Evil 1, you'll probably be like, this looks crap in comparison.
I think for us though, I think we played the games at the perfect time, because we played it from 1 all the way right through, and we were just and I think for us, you see, because we were in an era as well, because we were in the middle of that transition from 2D 3D games. Unlike when you see today, like, I don't mean to be like disrespectful like to people and stuff like that, but I find that people today usually slate those type of games, and they don't respect it for what it is. They just make fun of it and just, blast it out of the water, when the truth is if you were in that position back, say, nearly 30 years ago, which is hard to believe, when we were playing it was a different time. And for us growing up, because it was all new to us, we respected the hell out of that game, and even its sequels, regardless of whether you think one is better than the other, or maybe not so much. You still respected them all for what they offered, because they were just different, and they were just it just made you feel something you never felt like other games couldn't make you feel.
It offered something different to people that people never had originally. You know what I mean? And that's what I liked. Like, you go to, let's say, Resident Evil 1, it opened up a whole new door to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Resident Evil 2 came in, and that opened up more doorways for people to venture through. Obviously with the story, everything, but what you had with it, like, you'd the likes of Leon and you'd Claire, you 2 characters, both completely different stories, the same as the first, but there was added stories to it, like different scenarios. You had scenario A with Leon, scenario B, you had scenario A with Claire, scenario B with Claire. It just opened up a whole new
it was huge.
Game.
It was a huge game.
You know what I mean? It was a huge game. And they all, think about it, they all interlinked. Even though you were playing, and they were all in were they all in separate discs as well? No?
They were 2 separate discs,
2 separate discs. One was A, one was B, or vice versa, whatever it was. But this whole story and everything, but between them all, just like the first one. So it was just a proper Resident Evil game. Nothing changed. You know what I mean? But the thing that added, the extra added feature to Resident Evil 2, which you will agree on, and I think many people will agree on, is compared to Resident Evil 1, you could free roam, you could do this, you could do that, and you could kill enemies fine. But Resident Evil 2, there was somebody there. Somebody there that would not let you leave until it actually killed you.
Well, you can still get around him, but he only appeared at certain points.
Yeah, but at certain points, but still, even at that was brilliant. That added feature to the game. It was, to me, it was like a Terminator.
The one thing
it wasn't going to leave until it killed you.
But anyway, like, even with that, I think the one thing that was missing from that, compared to the first game, was the live choices, depending on different influences or choices that you made. Resident Evil 2 didn't have that, because again, it really boiled down to the dynamic, the way the scenarios played out. But it removed that live choice, because things that didn't play, everything was more set in Resident Evil 2 compared to the first game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, Steve, you're referring to Mr. X there, but Mr. X didn't come in until scenario B, right?
Yeah. But even at that, it was just that type of element that added to the game. Right, I know where Peter was coming from, and the game was actually pretty set out to where
it's
it
more
should be
linear.
Played. It's like you didn't have a choice. It was just play the game the way it should be played. There was nothing. But the fact is that they added that to it, I thought that was phenomenal. I thought that was brilliant.
The the invincible enemy. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was.
Well, that was the beginning of the Stalker.
I will admit though, as much as I do love the second one, I was so hyped for. Like for me, it's the most excited I've ever gotten towards a game, considering how much I love the first. But I will be honest, I got through it 10 times faster. But then I suppose I was kind of probably disappointed because it didn't challenge me the same way as the first game did. But then I suppose what actually happened was because we played the first game so much that we knew everything of that game inside and out, that by the time we got to the second game, and the fact is we had those demos, like the preview demo and even that 10-minute demo, you were able to nearly get through like a quarter of the game in the space of like 10 minutes if you knew what you were doing. And I think what actually happened was that it kind of deflated the experience to a certain degree, to a point, because we had all that experience and we knew we were pretty much masters of Resident Evil 1 at that point, that by the time we got to Resident Evil 2 we pretty much knew how to approach everything. So we were able to get through the game a lot faster. It didn't challenge, it personally didn't challenge me in the same way as it did now. I'm saying that it did when Mr. X or the Tyrant came along, because he was a badass and you just didn't know what way to really take him, and you didn't know whether to run past him or whether to show up. Yeah, and you had to use different strategies to deal with him. So that, and especially even with the liquors as well. So it was challenging in a lot of ways, but this didn't have the same effect on me as the first game did. But then I suppose the first game in a series, when you're new to it, is always going to be the one that hit you the hardest. Like
even going to Resident Evil 2 and you had puzzles, but I'm not putting the game down. The game was phenomenal because everything that they've done for it. But even the puzzles wise, I thought from the first one, the puzzles were more challenging than the second.
Yeah.
Which is agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Puzzles were a piece of cake in the second one, and there wasn't enough of them.
There wasn't enough, and they were just too straightforward that anybody could do.
Because the campaign length overall felt a lot shorter too, but I think it was because of the fact is you had the other scenarios that you could replay the game.
I think that was the reason why.
It just generally felt a wee bit shorter. So it did.
I have to admit, my opinion of it is that I can acknowledge that the game is a triumph, and it betters everything about the first game in terms of visuals, the overall size of the game. You had your scenario A, scenario B, replay value was good that way. Just generally the overall quality was better, but it didn't beat the first game in terms of challenging you.
Yeah.
And Peter, you're right, because I remember the day we got that game, we both got it at the same time.
We went to Dublin to get it,
and we got
on the train.
And I never forget, like, we were home, say, by midday or 1 p.m, and you went to your house and I went to my house. And the next time you saw me, I had completed Leon scenario A.
Yeah, you literally, like, 3 hours later, 3 hours later, nearly, you had done it. I was only about halfway through the game. Now, I was taking my time, I was enjoying it, but you had literally, you had it done. You're like,
but you're right, it did not challenge me one bit. And, like, I never had a problem where I didn't have enough ammo. And it was just, I was left very deflated at the time. And thinking to myself, it just didn't even challenge me.
I think it goes back to what we were saying there a minute ago. The fact is we had a lot of build up to it with the demos and stuff. And I think that probably, in a way, took away some of that hit.
But I would agree with you to a certain extent there. But if you notice, like, the games that come out further on, in terms of puzzle, like Resident Evil 3 had some good, decent puzzles in it that challenged you.
Yeah, it did.
And I think that 2 they just went all out action in 2, and they'll say that Resident Evil 3 is all out action. But I thought
3 definitely had harder puzzles. 3, actually, if anything, 3 probably has the hardest puzzles out of any of them.
Yeah, and 3 games. But Resident Evil 1 didn't hold your hand.
No.
And I get the point where that's your learning curve. And when you went to Resident Evil 2, you already had the experience from 1 that benefited you. But I just thought puzzles in Resident Evil 2 were non-existent, and that's why I said about Resident Evil 1. Do you consider it to be a puzzle game? I do. It's
definitely,
and 2. It was missing from 2,
because if you look at 2, if you get a certain object, you know exactly where to place it and what to do with it. But in Resident Evil 1, you didn't. You had to actually think about what you had to do. But in Resident Evil 2, it was just sailing. It was just
when you think Resident Evil 1. The Doom books, you had to figure out that you check it and open the book and you had a medal inside it. In Resident Evil 2, they took away the ability to check the items in a 3D.
Well, you already had them and you knew where to put them. Because obviously you must have searched that place and gone, well, there's an item. Then if you get that item, I know where it goes. And you go and put it in. That's it.
I still think Resident Evil 2 in its own right, in my own opinion, I still think it's an absolute masterpiece for what it does.
Yes, most definitely.
So it does. I think it definitely set the standard, because the thing is, the one thing that was done right with it, regardless of whether what we think about it in terms of its puzzles and stuff, that the fact is that they overhauled it dramatically from the first game, that they took on board what was said and stuff like that, and they did, like, visually at the time. It was probably the best looking game on the PlayStation at that time in terms of the visuals and stuff, because even the human characters looked even more lifelike and real compared to anything else that was out there at the time. It has easily one of the best soundtracks in a video game, even as good as the first one. It just has so many good qualities. I think it's just because of where we kind of fit in that, because we were so used to from one with the other. But it doesn't take away from the fact it's a phenomenal game, and the fact is that we regard the recent remake over the last couple of years, it literally took everything from what was already good in that game and expanded on it, so it proves that the original formula was already good to begin with, and the fact is that they excelled on it with that remake, and that remake for me is the best game I've played in the last 10 or 15 years, hands down.
RE2 remake?
Yeah. It's the best. That and the Resident Evil 1 remake are the two best remade versions of any game I've ever played.
I agree with you on that one there.
Yeah. Because they take everything that's great and they expand on it and just make them better. That's why I can't wait for Resident Evil 4, because I think they're going to do the same with that.
Yeah, I'm hoping, definitely, for sure, they do it.
Yeah. I think they have to. They know exactly what the remake of 1 came, and Resident Evil 2, you know what I mean? They know the expectations of the people, what they want. They have to deliver. They have to.
Yeah.
So, Resident Evil 2, I would actually in my opinion, I would go as far as say that they actually improved on even the soundtrack.
Oh yeah. The soundtrack.
I think the soundtrack in Resident Evil 2 is absolutely phenomenal. One of the best soundtracks you'll ever get.
Brilliant.
I still never, playing the Resident Evil 2 remake, I still never actually listened to the actual soundtrack from that game. I only play it with the original soundtrack from Resident Evil 2. I won't play it with anything else.
Same.
Yeah.
And do you know I've pre-ordered Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
Deluxe edition, and it's got the original soundtrack.
You know, the music when Mr. X or the Tyrant comes in is even more terrifying in the new game with the original theme, the original music, than it is in the original game. It's even more devastating when you hear that tune. It's crazy how it really gets. Do you remember the time when I first played it, and I just moved on to the second scenario, and we were on the chat one day, and because I didn't realise that he comes in a lot earlier in the game. And you sat back and you said nothing, and of course he comes walking around the corners and about to go into the star's office, and I freaked, and you were pissing your sides laughing at me. All you was the music, so and I was like, see nuts, and you come walking around the corner like, what the hell?
It's like, the music's there, you're like, where is he? Where is he? Is he behind me? Is he in front of me? Is he beside me?
Yeah.
And no matter how hard you look, he just surprises you so much.
Yeah. Oh my god. And the fact is, one thing that I loved about that game compared to the original, because at the original he was structured and he only came in certain places, but in the remake, at different points in the game, especially in the police station when he did arrive, he was everywhere. You didn't know where he was going to go. You could always hear him, and you were hoping you wouldn't find him. And the amount of times you walk into a door, he's walking through the other end, and he knocks you over. Or you walk in, and he's literally his back, and he's standing there, and you're quickly turning around trying to get back. I hope he doesn't notice.
It's the bit where he bursts through the walls.
It is so bloody terrifying. It is insane how good that is.
Yeah.
And how scary that is, and still is.
Yeah. He's definitely one of the best stalker characters ever created.
Oh my god, it's insane how good that game is. So
it was probably the very first game I played, maybe you played, where you actually had a character that actually is stalking you and going, never had that before. It's like bone chilling. You just don't know where he is, or you hear things, you go, oh crap, do I go out there, do I not, do I stay here, do I go somewhere else, do I backtrack? You just don't fucking know.
The truth is though, it's
always on your head, it's always on your mind.
Yeah. It's because of the foundations of the original game is so good. That's why they were able to make such a good remake.
Yeah.
In fairness,
I liked it as well. Julie, you think about the original, you just had Chris and Jill, but that were the characters you played. But with Resident Evil 2, obviously you had Leon and then Leon and Claire. But later on in the game, you could pick, or not say pick, but the game went on. If you were playing with Leon, the game went on to Aiden. You can control later.
You know, the thing is,
and then it would on to Sherry then when you're playing with Claire.
Yeah.
I like that.
The crazy thing about Resident Evil 2, though, the dynamic when you think about it changed, because when we played Resident Evil 1 originally, our favourite character was to use Jill. When we got to Resident Evil 2, we always picked Leon. Leon was always really the go-to character.
Yeah, Leon was the first one I picked.
Yeah,
even in the remake, I'd still go with Leon.
You still go with Leon over anything else. Yeah,
I went with Leon myself.
Yeah.
I think we kind of knew, because obviously we played it before, but...
Yeah, and I think you see because of
Resident Evil, we're going to be the main this time.
And even with Resident Evil 4 as well, because obviously Leon's become a fan favourite amongst everybody in the franchise, like, so, yeah, he's kind of like the go-to guy in it.
Yeah, he is, he's sort of like, he's been kind of ushered into that spot.
Into that role, Well,
what do you think of the story, though, with the G virus of the second one? What do you think, compared to the first one when you did the T virus?
Well, I didn't really like the fact that they were just going through alphabets to get
that's the way I was thinking. That's what I was thinking.
You know, like, but yeah, I enjoyed. You know what I liked about it, because you had like, am I right in saying Birkin was he was in Resident Evil 1 in terms of the documents that you would read? Yeah. So they carried, like, I enjoyed that the fact that they carried on in there. You know, in terms of Resident Evil 2, the story. The plot kept moving on from there, but it thickened. You know, when you hear about Irons and all that being involved, and
he was bribed by Umbrella and the whole lot.
But I mean, I was more into the story in Resident Evil 1. That's all I'd say.
Yeah. Is it the case where, as much as Resident Evil 2 is brilliant, are you always going to go back to your diehard, your first love?
Yeah, for me. Yeah.
I think it's the same with myself too.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. And I totally enjoyed Resident Evil 2. I really did. But I think your first love is your first love.
Yeah. But even like as good as I can acknowledge that Resident Evil 2 is a phenomenal game, and it improves pretty much everything over the first game.
It's fantastic.
Except for the puzzles. And that was it. That's the only thing that I wanted to be challenged. And that's why I liked about like Resident Evil 3 when it came out. It was a good challenge. The Nemesis was terrifying. And, you know, like even when you think of Resident Evil 4, like Resident Evil 4 was absolutely enormous game. You know, it changed from the tank controls, the pre-rendered backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. But it improved everything. And it eventually kind of really did take the franchise to the next level. But in terms of Resident Evil 2, just quickly going back to that, I felt let down. The fact that I was able to complete it on the first day I got it.
Yeah, no, it wasn't challenging. I agree.
Yeah, well, thankfully you had the scenarios to keep you busy. But
but was it their way of not challenging puzzles, but just add more to the game?
Don't know.
What do you think about that? I'm kind of.
Well, you see, I think a lot of it probably had to do with going on behind the scenes, because I know the likes of Shinji Mikami, he wasn't full on with the second game compared to he was at the first. Yeah, so I think there was a lot of elements that were left out. So he gave the reins to another guy. So obviously they changed a lot of stuff. So I don't know what for back and forth. They obviously left stuff out, but probably because they could put stuff in. Because even with the framework of the PlayStation, there was a lot of limitations in terms of what they could add and couldn't add, and vice versa. So I suppose that played into the dynamic as well, you know, when you think about it that way. So actually here that's a topic
beyond our pay grade anyway.
But that's it, and it's something that we will probably never know the full story to.
No, never. Yeah. But still, all in all, Resident Evil 2, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it did. It's a good game.
It is.
Just not my favourite Resident Evil. It's most people's favourite, but not mine. So just before we move on, I wanted to mention about the weapons in the game and the fact you could upgrade them. I always remember, and you know what I'm going to say next, Peter. The shotgun.
Oh my!
And the noise from the shotgun.
I got in so much trouble, because you remember I bought that old Hi-Fi off you, and I had.
Yeah, I got in trouble before you because it used to be in my house.
Yeah, and I remember because you gave me that. I got that cable off you as well that you could hook the SCAR cable that you could hook it up to your Hi-Fi and the whole lot.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget my mum and dad coming into the room 1 o'clock in the morning, and all you was. Bang. It was actually that loud that my neighbour next door would complain. She come in to my mum the next day, says, "Did you hear the noise of that they had on the TV?" I don't like it. It was really
Yeah, there was no good headsets back then.
It was just so loud. It just wasn't. It wasn't even funny. Like that shotgun.
And do you remember the damage it used to do? It didn't blow off the zombie's head. It would blow off.
Oh, it would obliterate
like the whole. Yeah, with half of their torso would just.
Yeah, arms, legs, head, half their chest. Everything was. It was literally obliterated altogether. Yeah. It was insane.
I'm trying to remember.
If you got multiple zombies together, it'd kill them all.
Oh yeah,
blow all their heads off.
But even the impact of it, like you used to send them actually like flying. Yeah, if there was a horde of zombies coming at you, it would send them all flying back.
The recoil in that gun was so powerful that Leon, whoever, like say Leon was using it, he would just stumble. He just couldn't control it. Like
yeah. Was there two different shotguns?
Yeah, standard. It was a standard like sawn-off barrel shotgun. They could hold 4 or 5 rounds, but then when you upgrade it, then you could hold more.
Yeah, but then the one that we're talking about was like an old kind of like a cowboy kind of shotgun.
Oh, that wasn't right. That wasn't even Resident Evil 3. That was a hidden item that you got after you killed, you knocked in the Nemesis so many times. You would get.
So how many shotguns was in Resident Evil 2 then?
There was 2. There was the standard shotgun. A small compact one, but then when you got the upgrade, you'd add all the handles, and that's where you got that super shotgun.
Okay, right, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the weapons, unbelievable.
Yeah, the weapon, and I remember when you unlocked, like, say, you got the machine with the Uzi, the machine gun. There was typical rocket launcher. For me, I loved the Gatling gun. The Gatling gun was hilarious.
Oh my word!
Yeah.
Jesus.
But the way I like the battle. Sorry. The way I like the battle. See, with Resident Evil 1, no matter how low you were in health, you were still the same. You had to go and check your inventory.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say, yeah.
Yeah, in Resident Evil 2, you could see the character, he was like holding his stomach.
Yeah.
And then if he was in danger, he'd be just dragging his leg or whatever it was. I mean, it gave you an indication of how low in health you were, you know what I mean?
Cool. Well, so, yeah,
I thought that was cool.
Because it used to be always, that was always a highlight they used to talk about as well. They thought it was very realistic because it was, if you had your shotgun equipped, Leon would almost use the shotgun like a crutch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
I didn't. I hate it. I hate it because if you had no health to cure yourself and you were trying to get away,
you'd slow down drastically.
You wouldn't get away.
Yeah, well, even without the shotgun,
you were screwed.
No matter what gun, you'd still be screwed. You were in danger. You weren't getting away.
I mean, the minute you went down to danger, you were just like...
you were gone. You were dead.
You were gone. Unless you had herbs or an F8 spray, you were gone.
Oh, many an instance I wasn't.
And even nothing. There used to be times where you'd be like, right, if I could just get to the next part, get through that door. And he's just crawling there.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Drive you nuts. Right. So, I'm trying to remember... Peter, you'll remember this. There wasn't, apart from the fact that there was different parts in the scenarios from A to B, there wasn't multiple endings, right? It was the one set ending.
Well, it depended. Each character kind of had a different variation of the ending depending on the scenario, but it wasn't too.
You know the way in Resident Evil 1, you could save Barry or you could save Chris and get the full end. That's what I mean. Like there was no. It was.
Yeah, with the first scenario, you'd kind of go into the cockpit of the train, and then the player would start talking to themselves and just remember something, and then it would just end abruptly. But then in the second game, then it would do the same thing again, but then it would carry on, and then that's when you had to go and finish the rest of the game. And then what was cool about the second game though was with the fact is that the train was on a time it was about to explode, and you actually seen everything happen in real time. They had to jump out, they had to stop the train from it being consumed by the mutated William Birkin, and then literally then they got off the train, they ran out the tunnel, and then you could see the whole thing blowing sky high. I thought that was pretty cool. The one thing they done really well with that, I know like when they moved away from the live action sequences to the CGI, but I have to say they've done a superb job with Resident Evil 2 in terms of the CGI. Because even when you look at even the original or the very first intro in the game, like with the car, when it was driving the police car and it was darting around the streets and they were doing drifting around corners, it was so cinematic for its time. It's like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It looked so real. And it was the same even with the train at the end when they blew it up. It just everything looked all totally cinematic. Way ahead of its time.
So one last point on Resident Evil 2. William Birkin as a character. So he was sort of like, he was the first main boss throughout the game that would evolve, right?
Yeah.
So the first time you made him, and then he would evolve, and he'd evolve further.
Yeah.
I just felt like, I was disappointed in that. When eventually on scenario B, you fought him on the train, and he was just this massive blob. You're just like, what? Like he was at his best when he evolved. When you fought him, was it a lift? that had like a train.
The train, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it was.
And he just had was it that bit, or was it the bit before where he just had the big eyeball on the arm and he would come after you?
Yeah, I think it was near enough that because he was halfway through his transformation at that point. But every instance where you fight him in the game was super, super, super tough. I mean, he's a git to put.
He was a nuisance. That's what he was.
Yeah, so bloody tough.
Yeah, but I just remember being disappointed in how he eventually finished off.
Yeah.
As you said, a big blob at the back of the train, in the back of the carriage, and you have to fight him, just this big blob. I'm going, what happened? I know exactly where you're coming from. It was kind of a big disappointment considering what he was, and if you actually had a sketch of him and you looked at it, he looks class. Compared to that, and then you look at a blob and you're going,
They kind of did the same thing to the Nemesis.
Jellyfish.
In the Resident Evil 3 remake, they pretty much did the exact same thing to the Nemesis in his final version in the RE3 remake.
Yeah,
and that was a mess.
Which they ruined Nemesis as well in 3 at the end. He turned into like a friggin' dog or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, right. So I think we've covered pretty much all we can cover on RE2. Maybe we can move on now to RE3.
Yeah.
So I remember being totally surprised by Resident Evil 3. I kind of had I acknowledged that it was being developed, but I'll never forget one night calling over to your house and your cousin was staying over.
Yeah.
And he had like a dodgy copy
of
Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and we're like, what? It's out? But obviously back then the games in Japan we would launch first in Japan and then eventually get over here.
And that's to say, like, because the thing is, magazines were very, very quiet about it. There wasn't much hype. There was no hype literally to Resident Evil 3 compared to 2. Because you remember Resident Evil 2, literally every magazine covered Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2, literally every month. Resident Evil 3, there was virtually nothing. There was only one or two previews I've seen in magazines, literally a paragraph or two, and that was it. They kept it very, very quiet. And then
it was supposed to be a spin-off, you see. It wasn't meant to be number 3.
Yeah, and then what happened was then my cousin rocks up one Sunday evening with the game, like say, dodgy copy back in those days, and they could not believe it. Didn't even know that it had even had been finished, and oh my god. I'll be honest, if I was to pick between the three, I love Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 1's my favourite, but my second favourite of the original trilogy is 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Because 3, I think the reason being is because 2, you kind of knew what was coming. We played demos of it. You had an idea of what was entailed in it. 3, it just hit you out of the blue, kind of like the first game, because you didn't expect it. And the fact is to experience it the way that we experienced it way before it was supposed to originally be released.
Yeah.
It just kind of completely blew our socks off because we weren't ready for it. So we were.
Do you know what my philosophy is on games that I'm really looking forward to?
We were just totally shocked by it.
If a game's coming out that I like, take for instance Resident Evil 4 remake.
Yeah.
Right. There's a ton of media stuff now.
Yeah.
On it.
Yeah, there is more.
Game Informer. Yeah, Game Informer had video footage and stills and all.
I'm trying to stay off YouTube. I'm not watching it. Yeah.
I think that's what happened to us with Resident Evil 2. We saw too much. We knew too much. Yeah. There wasn't a big enough surprise element.
It was oversaturated. I think that's what the experience.
Resident Evil 3 came out. It totally just surprised us.
I remember there's a question.
Well,
right, the 2 years, and it is a case where we've seen when we shouldn't have seen. Like Resident Evil 1, we went into the game cold turkey, hadn't a clue. Resident Evil 2, you bought the director's cut, you played Resident Evil 2 demo, so you knew what Resident Evil 2 was about. Resident Evil 3, nobody knew anything about. You played it, you enjoyed it. Now, would I be right by saying that if you play a demo of a game beforehand, is it going to ruin that game for you, or is it not?
It depends.
Or it's, I'm not saying ruin it, but
I was going to say the exact same thing as Peter. It depends.
It depends because,
or is it? Not, I don't mean like ruin it, but it's going to take the enjoyment out of it.
It depends.
You kind of know what way the game's going to pan out over the course of the game. You could say, you know what I mean?
It depends on the game, because like when you look back at some of the other demos, like say when we discussed even in the last video that we even had with the PlayStation, we played like Excalibur 2555 AD, which we loved that demo. Probably not so much the final game. Yeah, but the thing is, it still didn't really take away from the experience, because when we still got the game right, the game might have been repetitive to some degree, but we still enjoyed it for what it was. We still respected it for what it was, even though it wasn't entirely like a great game. But demos didn't always destroy the experience. If I remember Metal Gear Solid, for instance. Metal Gear Solid was a perfect example of that, where it had a perfect demo, perfect length, perfect balance. You couldn't wait to get the final game, and then when you did, it didn't matter whether you played the demo or not. It didn't phase you at all, you know. So, and Silent Hill was the same.
I just thought the demos with Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid were actually better than Resident Evil.
Yeah, I remember playing when we got Metal Gear Solid, and we got a demo of Silent Hill 1 with it, and that didn't deter from the experience. And it was actually a bit further into the game. You were actually in the school, and it was already in the Hell Nightmare mode, and it didn't take away from the experience when we got the final game. Like, Dig, remember you got you got Silent Hill first originally, and all of that, it didn't. See, with all of those demos, now Metal Gear is an exception, because Metal Gear was very similar to the likes of Resident Evil 2, where it was completely saturated in the media and on magazines and stuff. But we made the exception of that, and we played it, we enjoyed it for what it was. Silent Hill didn't get as much publicity, but we knew that it was there. But it didn't get the same level of publicity. But I think that, like other games that we played over the years with regards to demos, I don't think that, even though the publicity wasn't as big on any of those demos, and we still enjoyed it for what it was, even with the final games. Like, even remember Rage Racer, played a demo of it first, then got to play the full game, and it was phenomenal. I remember playing the full game then in Veddy's house, and I loved it, and it's one of my favourite racing games of all time, the third Ridge Racer game. And yeah, I think it just depends really on the whole dynamic. I think, because Resident Evil 2, it's different because we knew what was coming, that kind of way, and I think that was the thing about it.
Is it what was coming, because you played it, we that you didn't enjoy it as much?
It's not that I didn't enjoy the game as much. I think this experience was somewhat diluted because I played the game before, but then a lot of the stuff that I played in it, for me, just felt so familiar to that of the original game that it was like, yeah, I've done this before, I've seen this before, I know how to do this. Boom, within 5 minutes I had the thing done. Now, there was a couple of instances in the game where I did get stuck, but I managed to overcome it fairly quickly. But then Resident Evil 3, that was completely all null and void. That went back to like what it did in the first game, because I didn't expect that. Now, on top of that, right, it's more faster paced, there's more action. The Nemesis is phenomenal. It's even creepier than any of the games, in my opinion. Yeah. But the puzzles in Resident Evil 3 are tougher than any of the 3 games, I think. They're definitely harder to do. You won't do them on your first attempt.
I think they knew from the second one they had to do something with the third.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So let's get it in depth in Resident Evil 3, right? So the first thing we talk about, obviously, is the Nemesis. You bump into the Nemesis quite soon in the game. Yeah. As soon as you get to the RPD, and then, as you say, Peter, we knew nothing about this game.
Yeah.
We're running along, enjoying our playing it, and next minute this creature it breaks into like a CGI scene, and you meet it's Brad, isn't it?
Yeah, and what was crazy about that as well, like, even just, like, I remember getting seeing the cover of the game, and it was the American cover that was on my cousin's copy of the game, and I remember seeing like the Nemesis on it, like, what the hell is that? And it's like, is that a new Tyrant kind of thing? And I never saw that, and went and played the game or whatever. Didn't expect to see him or to meet him literally in the first few minutes of the game. And what scared me the most is the fact is he talked, like when he shouted stars, and the music. Oh my god, that music still fucking creeps me out even to this day, when he's in the background, when you hear the really eerie music. And when he called it stars, and the way he done it, he's the most intimidating version of the Nemesis there's ever been. There's never been a more intimidating version. Like, they've tried to do it in later games, and they've never, even the remake, they've never made him as intimidating as they did in that game. He's more, just the way he says stars is so scary, it's not even funny. But at the same time, it's just, when he popped up, you didn't expect, and what made it worse is he ran at you. And I mean, when he ran, he was faster than you. And you're like, oh my god, what do I do? You froze. Literally, it was like a static motion. You just didn't know what to do. You were just like, like, you couldn't even. You were fumbling the controller so much because you were panicking. I think at one point I dropped the controller out of panic because I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, because I'd never seen that, like, compared to the other games. Like, I know the Tyrant ran at you in the later half of the game in Resident Evil 1, but that was a build up to that. Whereas this thing came in literally from the get go, bang, ran straight at you. And you're
well, the CGI brings him in as this monster who's just, and what he does to Brad, I know it doesn't show it, but you get the idea. And then he comes out, and then you're just immediately faced with the return of live action choice, and it's actually live action choice.
Shoots rockets at you and everything.
Yeah.
But then, you're left, right, enter the RPD or fight the monster, and it's like, wow, this is my first time playing this game. I'm running.
Yeah.
Straight into the RPD, and you're just like, is he coming in after me? But
running was usually the safest option.
Yeah, but when you did choose to fight him, then that's when you like. I want to talk about the dodge mechanic now. I was never.
You took it out of my head.
Took a while to master that now. So
it was very hit and miss. There was times where he's going to hit you. Am I right in saying, right? So your aim button was also your dodge button.
Yeah, you had to use one of the directions as well on top of that, and you had to time it.
Yeah, it was just so. Yeah, it wasn't for me. But anyway, like it was just incredible, and the Nemesis was terrifying. And what I want to mention about the soundtrack then is, you have that sound when you know that he's about to appear, and it's like it's almost like a bunch of violins just playing, the same note, and it's just like, I've heard that before, and you're thinking, right, where's this going? Next minute you hear stars,
and you know he's in the area, but he doesn't appear straight away. That was the one thing that the game did so well. Am
I right in saying you
so much?
Yeah, certain areas you go into, you'd hear him roar, but he wouldn't actually be in the area.
Be in the area,
yeah. He was terrifying. The minute he ran at you, you would just shit your pants. Game over.
Because the music would play when he was in the area, because the music would play, but then you'd be expecting him to just appear, but he didn't. But you could hear him saying stars because you knew he was close by. And then all of a sudden, then you get closer to a door or something like that, and all you hear the door opening in front of you or behind you, and then you could hear. Then the music get even louder, and then it would change its tone, and then he'd start running at you like panicking and trying to look for the first door you could find to get away from him. But then what happened was, it made it worse as he followed you through the doors. So you're like, that never happened before.
But it was cool. One of the best features was you choose to fight him, you put him down, you got a reward.
Yeah.
You got a weapon part or an upgrade or something. That was amazing.
That was where that shotgun came into, and you also got an upgraded handgun as well that you could shoot a lot faster as well.
And that brings me on to my next point: the fact that they brought in ammo creation.
You create stronger different.
And you could play around with the elements, the gunpowder elements to create even better stuff.
Handgun ammo, shotgun ammo, magnum ammo.
Yeah. That was really good.
That was cool. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And my notes I have here, the puzzles, as you've already mentioned, were back full on.
Yeah. The puzzles were really, really tough in that game. Really tough. Even today, if I was to sit down and play it now, I'd still struggle with them.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say is that you spent a lot more time outdoors.
Yeah.
And you got to see more of the city, actually.
Yeah, you did.
Which I thought
was
great.
Yeah,
I thought it was absolutely brilliant that you got to see more of the city.
Yeah.
And one other thing as well, the return of one of our favourite enemies, the hunters.
The hunter, yeah.
Oh man, do you remember that you got into the hospital and you were like, I know that sound.
They were probably tougher in this game because they at that time they'd evolved especially with regards to like the animations and how they were developed. They were a lot more free flowing, so you couldn't really judge how they were going to move around so quick, and they could kill you a lot quicker as well.
Yes,
so they could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's one important part we failed to talk about Resident Evil 3, and that was the return of Jill.
Yeah.
She was completely exempt from RE2, and she was probably, like, I would say, the most popular character in Resident Evil 1 anyway.
Yeah, she was, yeah.
Obviously the game was easier with her.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really cool, and it was actually, when you think about it, it's the first Resident Evil game where you didn't have a choice anymore who you played as.
Yeah, that she was the sole focus of the entire story.
Yeah, the whole thing. Now, obviously, that brings me on to the next point, and that was the introduction to Carlos into the franchise. And you got to play as Carlos in certain areas. But, it was great to have Jill Valentine back, and she was pretty badass in it. I enjoyed, like, she is my favourite character in the whole franchise, and I love what they've done with Resident Evil 3 for Jill, but I just, in the remake Resident Evil 3, but I just think that the remake 3 ended up just sucking a little bit, because they cut it too much.
Yeah, I know, like, I often say this as well, like, I did enjoy the Resident Evil 3 remake. I don't think it's a bad game for what it is, but
no, it's not.
It just, for what it represents, it misses the mark, because like you said, they cut out so much, and if they had just added those things into it, it would have been the perfect game. And obviously they didn't mess the Nemesis up at the end. it would have been the almost perfect game.
But they messed up the Nemesis anyway.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
You know what I mean? Like,
the end of it, yeah.
Even throughout the game, he was scripted.
Yeah.
And he just, I don't know. I didn't
weird
really like him in this one.
In the original game,
in my opinion, I think it was rushed.
No, you're right.
The funny thing is, in the original game, right, he obviously had scripted moments where he would guarantee to appear, but then there was other areas, depending on the area you're in, he could appear randomly, which was scary. But in the remake, that didn't happen. He was only literally scripted, and that was it. You know.
And the fact that like he would be on top of a building or something, and then you'd be running away, and next minute he'd feckin' show up in front of you. Like that was terrifying, and that was pretty cool. But I don't know. There was just something about the Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 remake that I was far more worried about the original Nemesis.
Yeah.
The
original version of Nemesis for me is the most intimidating enemy I've ever witnessed in a video game.
He had far more of a personality. He was far more intimidating. He was far more scary. He had it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think in terms of Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 3 remake, I would take Mr. X. I would take Mr. X over him any day. Yeah. I was more worried about Mr. X.
Yeah, the original Resident Evil 3, the Nemesis, he had a presence about him. Yeah. You didn't get that presence with the remake. It just wasn't there. You didn't feel that you were on your toes the whole time. That, oh crap, I have to go here, I have to go there, I have to avoid him. You didn't know which way he was going to go. You just didn't have that. With the original, you had that.
Yeah. The battle against him in the remake in front of the clock tower, he's in the dog form.
I'll be honest, I hated that. I thought that ruined him then. And too early on as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the original Resident Evil 3, you actually explore the clock tower. And you come across him in there, and he's still in his normal form.
Yeah.
And I just, it pissed me off with the remake that they cut out all of that stuff. Like they cut out the part with the Gravedigger enemy, and anyway. Resident Evil 3 original, I loved every minute of that game.
Oh, yeah.
And there's one thing I loved the replay value just for the epilogues at the end.
Yeah,
I think wasn't there 10? Was it 8 or 10?
8.
All right, yeah. And you had to play the game
just to get
8 times just to get the wee epilogues about various characters.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact that they brought back Barry.
Yeah.
In 3.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I love that
pretty cool.
Because
Chopper.
Yeah, but that's it. It's like I always say, like, I know Barry got sort of like his own kind of thing in
he kind of got left out. He kind of got pushed to the side in certain ways.
Yeah, I've said this many a time to you guys in discussion about Resident Evil that I one of the if they remake Resident Evil 1 like they've made Resident Evil 2,
I would love
it. If Barry had his own scenario.
Yes, exactly. If they wanted to add something different to it. Play as Barry. Show the whole manipulation of Barry
and how things happened. Yeah, exactly.
And they can add all those elements where you would randomly bump into him and stuff like that. I just think that's pretty cool. And you could add parts where he bumps into Chris and stuff. They could do something because he's a wonderful character, and in terms of how would I say it, like he's probably
one of the most influential characters in the game when you think about it, because he does a lot even though he's not there.
Well, he's the most. I think he's very interesting character.
Yeah.
Like Jill, you just know she's the master of unlocking, and Chris is like.
Barry's definitely is probably the most overlooked character in the franchise.
Yes, but he's very interesting. He's got a very interesting background. That he's a tragic character. His family have been held hostage. He's been blackmailed to turn on his mates, and I just think that's a better story than playing as the master of unlocking.
That's like a film movie type story, that kind of way.
Well, it is,
think about it.
He's more substance to him, I think, than the others.
Exactly.
So I think definitely, like, if there's a possibility that Resident Evil 1 gets another modern remake, just like Resident Evil 2 and 3 did, definitely I'd like to see Barry play a bigger role and maybe have his own scenario.
A separate story.
I want to play a game
mode. A separate game mode of Barry. I think that'll actually really work. That's the trick, because you like to get more in depth and like to get to know each individual character.
But Barry, as you said,
it'd
be fascinating.
Well, the one thing
Barry's so out of it.
Well, the one thing
that came in out. You'd like to get to know, as you said, he was manipulated by Umbrella because he was held to ransom. He had to do things. If he doesn't do it, his family's going to get killed. You know what I mean? That's a brilliant storyline.
Well, you see, the one thing I love about one thing I love really about, even with regards to the whole aura of Resident Evil and the lore, it is the characters, because you grow an emotional attachment to them in many ways. Like, you get to see the background. That's the one thing I do love about the games, but I also feel that a lot of the times in between games and even some of the movies, they're only starting to do that now with some of the CGI movies where they're kind of diving into some of the elements of the characters, but they don't do enough. I would have loved to have seen even books or even additional games or side pieces that kind of talked about certain elements of the characters, like even down to the likes of even their mental states and stuff like that, how the events of Raccoon City affected them, and how they really got into it. I know you kind of got some ideas in the likes of the epilogues at the end of Resident Evil 3, but I would have also liked to seen more detailed elements of how Leon became a special agent, how Chris ended up in the BSAA, how Claire ended up where she went, and what happened to Rebecca and all that. Even what happened to Barry after that in between those events.
I think it needs to start from the ground roots up.
Because the next game then after that was that you didn't see Barry in was the one on the Game Boy. It was that Resident Evil Gaiden. And Leon was in it as well, and it was more of a spin-off. So there's massive gaps there with some of the characters that you would have liked to have seen more in as well. I
think starting off, as Dean said, he hit the nail on the head. Go with Barry, because just throwing it back to Resident Evil 1, when Barry's holding the gun to Jill's head just outside the elevator laboratory, and he's ready to kill Jill. Why? Because Umbrella's holding him for ransom. If he doesn't kill Jill, his family's dead. You know what I mean? There's a story straight away, and the whole story is continuous even before that, through the mansion, everything. You can see Barry at some stages with the head down on his shoulders, like he's trudging along. Like, there's a story there for Barry. Diggy had it, and there should be a story made for him. Definitely, there's a lot more.
I think they could do what they could do is if they remade the game, they could just do your normal traditional. Plays Jill, plays Chris. Once you complete both campaigns, you can unlock Barry's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Play the game through and complete it before
from
you get
to... And then you'd have Wesker more involved. I just love to see something like that.
Yeah, something like that would be fantastic. You get to know the more lore of each character. It'd be just brilliant. But you said Barry's kind of the hidden ones that you don't really talk about.
Yeah. Sure.
It'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Right, so I think we've covered all of Resident Evil 3. So, Peter, I know you want to talk about some of the spin-offs on the PS1 area.
Yeah, I know there was one spin-off that mentioned, it was kind of like the last Resident Evil game to be released on the PS1, and it was The Survivor. It's an interesting concept. I know it's totally different from what the original ones, and the gameplay is a lot shorter, you complete it within an hour. But there is a lot of good replay value.
That's short.
Yeah, and but it does tell much of the game's lore, because it has a load of really interesting documents that even mention Leon, and your man that you play as, I think he kind of worked in the same area with Leon, so he kind of knew him to some degree. Now, I know the story isn't as good, and to be honest, the acting in it is terrible, even worse than Resident Evil 1.
They keep the theme going.
Yeah, but it was their first attempt to try and to bring Resident Evil into a first person horror. I know they use Lycon elements, but that's the thing. What's interesting about it is because the original game in the series was intended to be a first person game. It was never meant to be the game that it was. It was because there were so many elements that they wanted to put in that they couldn't add it into it. So that's where I remember reading up about it, that Shinji Mikami ended up during halfway in the early stages of development, he ended up playing Alone in the Dark on the PC, and that's where straight away the light bulb moment where he hit and was like, what, we need to change the direction where this game's going. Did we want to add the things in we want to add? Now there was a lot of stuff I think that was left out, but they obviously tried with different iterations and spin-offs. They definitely wanted to try and test things to see how it would fare out. Now, it's not to say that Survivor is a great game, but at the same time I think it's interesting to see what they were trying to do. I think it was more used as a testing platform to see if they could do a first-person horror game, and it did do it quite well. Now, it's not the scariest game out there, but it does have its moments, it really does. And the fact is that they have more multiple versions of Mr. X in it as well. I always thought that was pretty cool, even though the animations and stuff might be a bit not as good compared to it, but the fact is that they had all of the enemies there, you had the hunters, you had the lickers, you had the zombies, you had the tyrants. It definitely had a massive appeal in that sense, and for what it did, for an early attempt at a first-person game, it had to pave the way pretty much for what led on to become what we see today. I think it was a good throwback to that. Now it's definitely not the best Resident Evil game, but I enjoyed it. I remember you had it. Like, I know you played it, you finished it as well. And we played through that quite a bit as well, because I remember there was a lot of elements in that game too that discussed the story in more detail, and we were interested to find out more about it because it also had different variations in terms of story. It also had some of that live action kind of, or live choice kind of sequence in it too, which was pretty cool. Depending on different routes that you took or whatever, you could unlock different weapons, and you would get access to different types of files and information, and different things would slightly play out depending on where you went and how you went about different stuff, which I thought was really cool as well. So it definitely did have its good features. There are a lot of good and bad points, but it definitely had some really good points, I think.
Yeah.
So it did. So
I think at the time we were just fascinated. Anything
Resident Evil related, and I know
it could have been pure dirt,
but we still enjoyed it for what it was. I know it was different, and we struggled to get used to it at first, but after a few weeks we got familiar with it, and we enjoyed it. You know, the same way as we did, because, like I said, we're just fans of Resident Evil. We're just fans.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the outing of Resident Evil, survival horror, anything that came out after that.
Yeah,
we wanted it. Well, that was no matter what
we would give it a go.
Exactly. Like, you remember a few years back when they announced that they were developing the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I remember we had many discussions about, like, talking about if they managed to do it in a way, even though we kind of knew that there was a temptation to want to go first person with it as well. But we were kind of like, no, don't do a first person, because that wouldn't do it any justice. Even though I have seen kind of like online or mods were done in VR, which they have done it really good. But I still think that the version that they finalised with the likes of the Resident Evil 4 style with the over the shoulder third person view, I think was spot on for the remake. Yeah. And I think if they found that balance, I think it would have been the perfect game. And Resident Evil 2 remake for me is the perfect game.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, like any new entries to the Resident Evil franchise, they should just stick with the over the shoulder. It's how the game is meant to be played. You know, tank controls unfortunately are just too old now. It's
yes and no. It depends on the game. If it's done right,
remake of Resident Evil and do over the shoulder.
But I think in terms of
remake them all at that, it'd be a hit.
In terms of what Resident Evil was trying to do, and I get what they were trying to do at the time, because there was a lot of limitations with the hardware, and especially even with the likes of the PS2. And see, the PS2, even though that was the best console, like in terms of sales, it was still an experimental console, because they still hadn't fully figured out different styles, perspectives, especially the controls, because I found the controls in a lot of games on the PS2 to be very finicky, and it wasn't really more refined until the PS3. The PS3, they managed to get it right. So I think a lot of elements, was still a lot of experimental elements in terms of what was there and what was represented. So I can understand why the original 3 games in the series were the fixed camera. Now, if I was to pick between...
I'm not disputing that. Yeah. I'm saying, in terms of future Resident Evil games, they should stick with the over-the-shoulder.
I think they should stick with the over-the-shoulder. Now, my personal favourite, if I was to have a choice, I would prefer the fixed cameras. And even love Code Veronica for that. But again, I do understand...
But Code Veronica was slightly different.
Yeah, but I do understand...
You had the sweeping and pan cameras, which was... I thought that's where the franchise was going to go.
Yeah, but I still see that there's limitations with that as well. There's only certain amount of things that you can do, but whereas when you have over the shoulder and even first person, there is a lot more that you can do. But in saying that, first person is still even more restricted when you really think about it, because you can only see one way. Whereas with the third person, you're pretty much a 360 view of everything,
and you still can get caught from the back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm playing Dead Space remake at the minute, and it's like I shoot what's in front of me and I think, I'm safe.
Yeah,
It's like no, but I just think that they done their experiment with the first person with Resident Evil 7 and Village, and it's good for what it is, but I just think Resident Evil should stick with its over the shoulder. Resident Evil 2 remake is phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's I'm hoping Resident Evil 4 is going to be the same.
Exactly what I was going to say.
I'll get into Resident Evil 7 myself, my own. I would say when we get to that stage.
The one thing I want to say, like before we finish up, I know like when I prefer like the fixed camera perspectives and stuff, but the way I see it is now, even though it's moved on, it'll never go back to that, but it still doesn't stop you, say, from going back and revisiting those old games, even like now with emulation and even with being able to play the games on modern consoles. Like we can still play a lot of those old games, and the fact is even there's a lot of indie developers, like even I was just saying about that other game, Echoes of the Living. There's a lot of developers out there that are still creating games in that style, so there's still there's still
a want for it, yeah.
Yeah, there's still a want and need for it. So there's plenty of opportunities out there. And even another game I was playing recently that I bought on Steam as well, Lake Haven, and that is another phenomenal game, and it's all 32-bit, and it plays like Resident Evil, but it feels very like Silent Hill. So it mixes the dynamic of the two. So like you said, there's a demand out there, and there is games out there to cater to that interest, if you know what I mean. If you do like those games, there is games out there, and even modern games that will definitely cater to that need, which is perfect for me because I love them. So, yeah.
So I think, is there any other games that anyone wants to talk about, or should we wrap it up?
Well, I suppose with the PS1, because they were all the Resident Evil games were on the PS1. Like you could go into the likes of Silent Hill and all the others. Now, but the one thing I will say about
a few other games, but I'll leave it for another episode.
The one consolation like we have with the original 3 Resident Evil games is how they, not even just Resident Evil 4 as well. When you think of Resident Evil, like right, Alone in the Dark, right, started that kind of fixed camera perspective type thing. But it was Resident Evil that modernised, that solidified the whole survival horror genre, that made it into its own genre in games.
Yeah, it made it popular.
And the thing is, Resident Evil is so revolutionary in what it did, because every iteration of the game, like when you think of the first person, like, or not so much the first person, the fixed cameras, but then the over the shoulder, like you look at every over the shoulder shooter today is modelled off Resident Evil 4. Every single one of them is modelled off.
Shinji Mikami.
Yeah,
that was the first game to do it.
And when you look at even the PS1 with the original 3 Resident Evil games, how many clones have there been of games bought on PS1, PS2, PS3? Now, not so much on the PS3, there wasn't as many games. But in the modern era, they're all modelled off the original 3 Resident Evil games.
Yeah.
Because, that set the standard. Like, even the non-horror games, like there was Hard Age, you had, so much, Silent Hill did have fixed cameras in certain areas, or like a planning camera to a certain degree. But then there was Hard Age, you had the likes of The Crow, there was In Cold Blood, there was City of Lost Children. There was an absolute abundance of games in the PS1 that used pre-rendered backgrounds, fixed cameras. And for me, it was just that. I know not all of them were as good as others, or some they weren't as great, but it was just a phenomenal time for me to get involved with it. Because the one thing I will say about a lot of those older games is that the atmosphere that they brought to you, there's just something about them that you just don't get anywhere else. You know that? You really don't. They just capture your imagination so much.
We've had that, and we still have it. That's why we always experiment in different survival horror games.
There's an aura about those older games that you really just don't get anywhere else.
No. You're right.
I'm being honest.
That's true.
There's another game that I tried a demo of it, but I'm definitely going to get around to buying it sometime, and it's called Tormented Souls.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. I have to get into that.
Never played it.
Yeah, it looks like it's difficult enough, from what I played, but I definitely have to play it. If you like Resident Evil old school, it's
definitely a good modern equivalent of it, because it got really good ratings, I think, like in reviews and stuff.
Yeah.
So
okay, right. So I think that kind of wraps us up for this episode. I think we definitely do one more anyway, just to talk about the later Resident Evil.
Yeah.
It's definitely the remakes, and we've other consoles with Resident Evil on them as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
And we can talk about the tragedy that is Resident Evil Code Veronica that has not gotten a remake. Resident Evil 4.
It needs a remake.
It
needs a remake.
Yeah, it needs
a remake.
Well.
Definitely.
Now, it doesn't take away from the original game. The original game is phenomenal. It's still a phenomenal game. But I think it would definitely do well with a remake, I think, as well.
No, it needs it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and a few tweaks as well in it too. It'd be nice.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So let's wrap this up. So that covers at least the first episode of our Resident Evil series of podcasts. So thanks to Peter and Steve-O for contributing, and we will hopefully get recording the next episode in the next week or two, and we'll have that available for everybody. Okay, so all that's left to say is good night, and thanks for listening, everyone.